He worked for years at one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, believing he was helping to save lives, but what he discovered changed everything. Today, this former employee reveals disturbing secrets. The cure for cancer already exists, but it is being hidden. Why? Who is profiting from this? And how far does the power of these companies go? Get ready to hear a story that will shake everything you believe about the healthcare industry. If you like mysteries and seeking the truth that they don't want you to know, subscribe to the channel to receive more videos like this. The story begins as follows. I worked for over 10 years in one of the largest pharmaceutical laboratories in the world. To preserve my safety, I won't say the name, but you can imagine. When I joined, I believed I was doing something great, something that would help save lives. But as the years went by, I began to see the dark reality behind this billion-dollar industry, a reality that still disgusts me. It all started when I was assigned to a special team that analyzed promising substances for treating cancer. During one project in particular, our team found incredibly promising results. It was a molecule capable of attacking cancer cells with precision without causing the devastating effects of chemotherapy. We were excited, believing we were about to revolutionize medicine. But the response from company executives was a real stab in the heart. In closed meetings, I witnessed decisions that showed the cruelest side of the pharmaceutical sector. The discovery was archived, simply shelved. The reason, according to them, launching a definitive cure would be the same as shooting yourself in the foot. "We can't kill an industry that makes us billions every year," I remember one director saying coldly. They were not interested in saving lives. They wanted addicted patients, people who needed expensive treatments, who returned for endless appointments and continuous medications. The cure was a threat to the company's astronomical profits. I felt powerless, but what revolted me most was the public manipulation. With each campaign the company launched about fighting cancer, I knew it was a lie. They weren't fighting anything. They were keeping cancer as a constant source of profit. It was difficult for me to continue. Every day at work was a burden on my conscience. I saw families destroyed, people mortgaging their homes to pay for treatments, while laboratory bosses celebrated record profits. What disgusts me most is how they manipulate people's hopes, using false promises while hiding real solutions. Today, I know that my decision to leave was right, but what I saw will never leave my mind. I'm disgusted by these companies. They could change the world, but they prefer to keep humanity hostage. If you think Big Pharma just ignores the cure, get ready for something even more revolting. They hide the discoveries, literally. I worked in the research and development sector of an industry giant. One of my roles was to review scientific patents for new molecules and substances. That's when I discovered how a perverse system of manipulation and control works. Did you know that pharmaceutical companies buy patents on promising drugs only for them to never see the light of day? It's not a conspiracy theory, it's a real practice that I witnessed myself. One specific case left a deep impression on me. It was a revolutionary compound developed by an independent university. They achieved incredible results in initial tests, but needed funding to move the project forward. That's when the pharmaceutical company entered the scene, offering an absurd sum to acquire the patent rights. I was at the meeting where they discussed this acquisition, and I thought the company would invest and develop the medicine. But to my surprise and horror, the project was immediately shelved. When I asked why, the answer was direct. This medicine would conflict with our best-selling products. Better to keep it off the market. They call this market protection. I call it sabotaging lives. Imagine how many families could have been saved, how many patients could have had a second chance. And it's not just one or two cases. There is a real race to buy and hide discoveries that threaten the treatments that generate the most profits. I kept thinking about the scientists who dedicated their lives to these projects, believing they were creating something for the good of humanity. They never knew what happened to their discoveries. I feel complicit, even though I tried to fight it, because deep down, everyone in the lab knew that this practice was more common than they should admit. The most revolting thing is that while doing this, these companies still present themselves to the world as heroes, as if they were the only ones who care about fighting diseases. It's a facade, a million-dollar theater, while they keep solutions locked in corporate vaults. That was one of the reasons I decided to leave. Seeing science weaponized to keep people sick was the final straw for me. Sometimes I still wonder how many other cures are trapped in these secret patents. And how long will they continue manipulating our hopes? I thought science was impartial, that it was a field where truth prevailed above all else. But my time inside a large pharmaceutical company proved exactly the opposite. Inside, I learned that scientific studies can be silenced, manipulated, or completely destroyed when they do not align with profit interests. And it's revolting to know how this happens. I remember well a case that left a deep impression on me. An independent group of researchers sent samples of a natural extract to our laboratory that demonstrated impressive efficacy against cancer cells. It was cheap, accessible, and easy to produce. They asked for financial support to advance the studies and perhaps take them to clinical trials in humans. My team was thrilled with the preliminary results. We had the chance to support a discovery that could change everything. But the enthusiasm was short-lived. Before we could even continue testing, I received direct orders from senior management. The project was to be terminated immediately. Worse still, we were forced to destroy all documentation and samples sent by researchers. When I questioned it, I received a cold response. That doesn't matter to our market strategy. The most shocking, this was not an isolated case. I began to realize that any study involving alternative or natural treatments was automatically treated with skepticism or disdain. The strategy was clear: discredit and disqualify before the idea gained traction. In meetings, directors justified these decisions by saying that the market is not prepared for such disruptive changes. But I knew the real reason. Natural, affordable treatments don't make a profit. What outrages me most is how these companies use their influence to shape the scientific narrative. They fund academic journals, have partnerships with renowned universities, and sponsor prestigious conferences. It seems beneficial, doesn't it? But this gives them the power to decide which studies deserve to be highlighted and which should be buried. I saw this up close. I worked on reviewing articles submitted for publication in a scientific journal funded by the company. Studies that presented treatment methods that did not involve high-cost medications were rejected. The justification was always the same: lack of robust data. But the truth was that they were afraid of losing control. When I left that job, I carried with me a mixture of indignation and impotence. As someone who dedicated himself to science, it is heartbreaking to see that so many lives could be saved if it were not for a system that privileges profit over progress. I still think about how many studies never reach the public because of this evil scheme. What pains me most is knowing that there are dedicated, brilliant researchers out there whose discoveries will never have the chance to change the world. And why? Because science, which should be guided by truth, is manipulated like a puppet by those who control money. I've always heard about the health benefits of plants and natural substances, but I confess that I didn't really believe in it until I started working directly in the research sector. It was there that I discovered that many of these natural cures are real, but they face a powerful enemy: the system. Inside the laboratory, we had access to hundreds of studies from universities and independent scientists on natural compounds that showed incredible results in the treatment of cancer. One of them was based on a plant found in tropical forests. The extract from this plant attacked cancer cells so efficiently that it was compared to some of the most advanced medicines. But there was a crucial difference. It was natural, cheap, and did not generate the devastating side effects that traditional treatments cause. Do you think this has encouraged the company? On the contrary. When the possibility of developing a medicine based on this extract was discussed, the idea was immediately discarded. In meetings, executives argued that a cheap and natural treatment would not be profitable. How are we going to patent something that anyone can grow in their backyard? I heard a director say, almost like a joke. For them, it wasn't worth investing in something that couldn't be monopolized. The scariest thing is how hard these companies work to block access to these natural cures. There is a real lobby for studies on natural treatments to be discredited, labeled as quackery. Meanwhile, they invest millions in campaigns to promote their expensive products, making it seem like they are the only hope. And any doctor or scientist who tries to publicize these treatments faces a wave of criticism and discredit. I remember a case where a small laboratory tried to carry out research on a natural substance. They achieved promising results in preliminary tests and began to attract attention. But lawsuits, regulatory barriers, and even smear campaigns against researchers soon emerged. Coincidence? No. This is strategy. They stifle any initiative that threatens their business model. I left my job because I could no longer deal with this. Seeing solutions being ignored or destroyed to protect profits sickens me to this day. Natural cures have enormous potential, but as long as the system is controlled by financial interests, most of them will continue to be suppressed. Sometimes I wonder how many lives could be saved if these cures were available. How many families would not have to go through the pain and suffering we see every day. It's outrageous to know that we have the resources to change this, but that we are trapped in a system that only sees dollar signs. During my time working in one of the largest laboratories in the world, I was exposed to information that left me perplexed. I believed that science was a collective effort to improve everyone's lives, but I discovered that there are incredible technologies being developed in secret. Technologies that could cure cancer and completely transform medicine. The problem? These technologies are being controlled by a select group of elites. I clearly remember the moment I was exposed to a top-secret project. It was a technology based on nanorobots, capable of identifying and destroying cancer cells without damaging the surrounding healthy tissue. The test results were simply unbelievable. It was a clean, effective, and quick solution. I thought we had discovered the definitive cure, but to my surprise, the project was immediately classified as confidential and placed under strict restrictions. When I questioned why we weren't developing this for the public, I received a response that disgusted me. These technologies are too valuable to be released en masse. The cost-benefit is not worth it. Let's prioritize who can pay. Basically, they were saying that these innovations were being reserved for rich and powerful people, while the rest of the world would continue to suffer from outdated and painful treatments. The scary thing is that this wasn't the only time I've seen something like this. There are several advanced technologies being developed in private laboratories, but they never reach the public because they are considered strategic for the elites. Some are used in exclusive clinics, accessible only to multimillionaires and influential leaders. Meanwhile, most people don't even know these solutions exist. I still wonder about the hypocrisy of it all. These companies run emotional campaigns promising that they are working hard to find a cure for cancer. But in fact, they already have the tools to solve the problem. They just don't want to share them. It's about power, control, and money. When I finally decided to leave, I felt betrayed and disgusted. Working to help humanity was my dream, but what I saw was an industry controlled by people who just want to maintain their fortunes and status. Meanwhile, millions of lives are lost each year. The technology that could save the world exists. I saw it with my own eyes. But as long as it is in the hands of these elites, it will remain beyond the reach of the majority. It is a cruel reality that needs to be exposed. When I started working in a large laboratory, I thought I was joining a scientific organization. But what I discovered was something much bigger and much darker. What I saw up close was how deeply governments are involved with the pharmaceutical industry, and how these ties create a system where profit is more important than human life. There was a case that left a deep impression on me. During a high-level meeting, we were discussing a revolutionary new drug for treating cancer. It was something promising, which could replace invasive treatments such as chemotherapy, but shortly after the meeting, we were informed that the project would be shelved due to strategic issues. It didn't take long for me to discover what was behind this decision: direct pressure from government agencies. These agencies, which are supposed to protect public health, were more concerned with protecting the large companies that support their campaigns and political interests. The message was clear: continue old, expensive treatments because they keep the economic wheels turning. And of course, there was always the talk that we can't destabilize the market. I saw confidential contracts that showed how large companies financed politicians and how, in return, they received regulatory benefits. This is why cheap medicines or revolutionary cures face so many barriers to approval. There is a joint interest in keeping things exactly as they are. What disgusts me most is the way public propaganda is used to disguise all of this. Politicians and leaders appear in cancer campaigns, posing as saviors, while behind the scenes they are working with these companies to ensure that no definitive solution reaches the masses. They are literally playing with people's hopes. There were times when I thought about reporting what was happening, but I knew what that meant. People who dare to stand up to this system are silenced in subtle, or not so subtle, ways. Once, a colleague tried to get information to the press about a medicine that had been deliberately blocked. Shortly thereafter, he was fired on a false charge, and I heard rumors that his career had been sabotaged. It was a clear warning to all of us. I left because I couldn't live with it anymore. It's not just a question of greedy pharmaceutical companies. It is an entire system involving governments and elites, working together to ensure that power and money remain in the hands of a few. It's difficult to accept that people who are supposed to protect and serve are helping to perpetuate a system that kills millions. But that's the truth. Governments know, companies know, and we as a society continue to be kept in the dark. During the years that I worked in a large pharmaceutical laboratory, I had access to projects that made me realize how much we are being deceived. The manipulation of genetic research is a clear example of how science is being controlled by financial and political interests instead of serving humanity. One of the most advanced projects I worked on involved gene editing cells to make them immune to cancer. The technology, based on CRISPR, was revolutionary. We achieved impressive results in initial experiments, with cells completely free of any signs of cancerous mutations. I thought we were about to change the world. But this euphoria was short-lived. I was soon informed that advances would be limited to private projects. This means the technology would be developed exclusively for expensive applications, such as personalized treatments for extremely wealthy individuals. Worse still, much of the funding was redirected to research that guaranteed the creation of new medicines, not definitive cures. I started to understand the game. Pharmaceutical companies are not interested in eradicating diseases. They want to control them. Manipulating genes to permanently prevent or cure cancer would wipe out a billion-dollar market. So instead, these technologies are shelved, or worse, used selectively to reinforce inequality. The most revolting thing is that they manipulate public perception. I have seen up close how scientific publications funded by these companies distort data to make genetic advances appear less promising than they really are. And meanwhile, true progress is hidden in confidential reports and used to serve only a select few. I remember a specific case that left me devastated. A study I led showed how a simple genetic change could drastically reduce the risk of certain types of cancer. I presented the data enthusiastically, but was told that it would not be viable for the market. In other words, it was a scientific advance that would not generate enough profit to justify its release. The scariest thing is how they justify it. They say it's a matter of recovering investment in research, but the truth is that they are simply preserving an economic model based on human suffering. This manipulation of genetic research is one of the industry's biggest crimes. They have the ability to prevent millions of deaths, but they prefer to focus on medications that treat the symptoms, not the cause. Today, looking back, I feel guilty for having been a small cog in this corrupt system. I left the lab because I could no longer bear the idea that we were holding back solutions that could save lives. The technology to end cancer exists, but as long as companies control genetic research, it will remain out of reach for most. Working within a large pharmaceutical laboratory opened my eyes to one of the biggest scams in the industry: million-dollar donations for cancer research. I used to believe that these funds were used to find a cure, but I discovered that they are actually carefully targeted to sustain the system, not transform it. Whenever there was a major fundraising campaign, the company would get actively involved, promoting donations and releasing heartwarming messages about winning the fight against cancer. It was like a carefully planned show. But what no one sees is where this money actually goes. Inside the laboratory, I worked directly with the project budget. I found that an insignificant portion of donations went to cutting-edge research or innovative technologies. Most of it was intended to maintain existing treatments, such as chemotherapy and radiotherapy, the same ones that have existed for decades. Why? Because these treatments are profitable, and the idea of a permanent cure is simply not on the agenda. The most revolting thing is how they manipulate the narratives. While large foundations tout partnerships and progress, they are actually funding redundant studies or projects that we already know will not lead to a cure. These studies only exist to maintain the appearance of progress while perpetuating the current business model. I remember a specific case in which a foundation made $1 million donation to finance a research program that was supposedly exploring new treatments. When I was assigned to review the reports, I realized that the results were practically the same as studies that had been carried out years before. When I questioned why we were repeating the same things, the response was, "It helps sustain the flow of donations." It's a perverse cycle. Donations create the illusion of hope, but in practice, they help maintain the system as it is. Worse still, many of these foundations have direct ties to the pharmaceutical companies themselves, creating a massive conflict of interest. They raise funds in the name of a cure, but use the money to ensure the market remains profitable. The most painful part of all this is that millions of people around the world donate their hard-earned wages believing they are helping to save lives. They rely on emotional campaigns that show smiling patients, scientists in labs, and promises of advancement. But the truth is that most of the money is just feeding a machine that has no interest in ending cancer. When I finally realized the extent of this scheme, I knew I could no longer continue. People deserve to know the truth. The money they donate is rarely used to find a cure. It is used to maintain a system that depends on sick people. This is the reality. As long as large companies and foundations continue to control resources, cancer will continue to be treated as a business, not as a priority to be eradicated. Something that most people don't realize, and that I also only understood when I worked in the sector, is how deeply cancer is integrated into the global economy. It's not just a health issue, but a multi-billion-dollar industry involving governments, pharmaceutical companies, healthcare systems, and even investors. This explains why a cure for cancer never seems to become a reality. I remember a meeting where one of the lab's most influential directors said something I'll never forget. Cancer is an economy. If you cure, you destroy an entire value chain. That stuck in my mind. At that moment, I realized that for these companies, cancer is not just a disease, it's an economic asset. Working directly in drug development, I have seen how cancer supports countless industries. High-cost medicines, advanced medical equipment, specialized hospitals, radiation therapy clinics, and even health insurance. All of this generates jobs, investments, and profits. It's a gigantic chain that depends on ongoing diagnosis and treatment, not a cure. The perverse thing is that this logic is not discussed publicly, but it is what guides many decisions behind the scenes. I was once involved in a project that involved a promising treatment that could drastically reduce costs for patients. The idea was to make treatment more accessible and widely available. But the project was abandoned because, according to executives, it would cause economic disruption, code for not profitable for shareholders. I also saw up close how large companies influence public policies to protect this system. They pressure governments to ensure that expensive treatments are covered by health insurance and financed by public programs. This way, they ensure that money continues to flow, even if the solutions are ineffective or outdated. The most frustrating thing is seeing how people's hopes are used as fuel for this machine. The cancer campaigns, the fundraising events, the political speeches, they all seem aimed at finding a solution. But in reality, they are just part of a system that profits from the problem. The more people believe they are contributing to the cure, the more they support the very system that keeps them dependent on endless treatments. When I realized the depth of this manipulation, I began to question everything. How can we expect an industry that profits billions from cancer to be genuinely interested in eliminating it? There is no financial incentive for this. Cancer is a market, and for them, markets cannot disappear. That's why I decided to leave. I couldn't continue working in a system that turns human suffering into a profit line. This truth is difficult to accept, but it needs to be said. Cancer is more valuable to the economy as a disease than as a curable condition. And as long as this logic prevails, the cure will remain just an empty promise.